And welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we have another Japanese recipe for you. This is a fried pork cutlet, also known as tonkatsu or pork katsu. Very traditional in at least North American Japanese restaurants. Really easy. Great. Who doesn't love fried food? I mean, it's really delicious. So here's our ingredients. We're going to start. We have some pork. We have pork shoulder that we're using. This is pork butt. We're going to be dredging that in some flour and some panko breadcrumbs. For the egg wash, we have an egg and some water. We're going to be using a little bit of salt in this as well. For the katsu sauce, we have Worcester sauce, we have oyster sauce, a little bit of liquid smoke, and ketchup. We were a little shocked when we found out how easy it was to make katsu sauce. And we're going to be frying this in some just plain vegetable oil. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, just plain vegetable oil. So we're going to start with our pork. As I said, this is pork butt, which is actually from the shoulder. It's a few different muscles combined into one piece, as you can see here. It's a little bit of a few different muscle groups combined together here. So we're just going to slice this, and you see we're not slicing it too thin. What we're going to be doing is pounding this out. So we're going to put this into a Ziploc bag and get as much of the air out as possible. And just going to close that up, make sure you're not cross-contaminating. We're going to let that sit for just a couple seconds. In the meantime, we're going to get all of our various things ready here to dredge it in. You do want to make sure that this is ready before you pound, because once it's pounded, you just want to take it out and get it ready to dress and then hit the oil really quickly. So for the egg wash, I mean, very simple. We're just going to beat one egg in this dish, and once it's beaten, we're going to add the water and then stir it well until it's well combined. Now, we're not going to be adding any seasoning to the flour or panko or anything like that, because any salt or anything that touches the oil is going to denature the oil. So we don't want to season the outside. So here you see we are going to, we're just using a good heavy-bottomed frying pan for this. If you have a tenderizing mallet, you want to use the flat side, not the textured side. And we just want to flatten this out. So we're just going to try and hit it on the center as much as possible, spread it out, thin it out. If you have a piece that has a lot of connective tissue, like end pieces or anything like that, the more you hit it, the sort of tenderer it's going to be. So there's two ways for us to really do this. So the first is we're going to show you here. We're not going to season the meat. We're going to season everything after it's done. Now, we've got some really nice pork here, so it's got a lot of flavor, and a little bit of seasoning after the fact is going to be fine. So from the pounding, we're just going to add the flour first. We're going to dredge it in flour. If you see any spots that it's not covering, just just cover it up with your fork. You want to shake off any extra, and that's going to go into our egg mixture. And you want to get that a good coating of egg, because that will definitely help the breadcrumbs to stick. So once you've got the flour and eggs in there, we're going to just drop that into the panko breadcrumbs. You can use regular breadcrumbs as well. We're using the panko because it's a little more traditional for the Japanese recipe. And if you see any little bare spots, just toss the panko on top, give it a little tap. That is fine. And then once it's all covered and seasoned, or once it's all covered and breaded and everything, you don't want it to sit around for too long. But here's our second method. So what we're going to do for this one, we're going to season the meat directly. So we're going to add a little bit of salt and white pepper directly onto the pork. But again, this is going to be underneath all of the breading. We don't want the salt to be touching the oil as much as we can avoid it, because it will denature the oil. It'll change how the oil fries and make it harder to reuse if you're conscious about reusing your oil. So there you go. We're just adding a little bit of seasoning before we get all of the accoutrement on the outside of this. And it doesn't change the flavor a whole lot. It's a little bit different, but again, if you're using a good pork, you know where your pork comes from. It's got a lot of flavor. A little bit of salt after you fry is going to be just enough seasoning for your pork. So again, you can see here we're just making sure that everything's covered. Now this folded over a little tiny bit, so if you see a little dry patch there that didn't get covered by the egg, go ahead and just give a little dab with your fork. That's fine. You do want to make sure everything's covered with the breadcrumbs. So you want to put this into hot oil. Now ours may have started perhaps a little under, but you can see it has started frying right away. It was definitely hot. It may have been a slight bit under. Now the only problem with really under temperature oil is if it's not hot enough, what you're frying tends to absorb the oil. Whereas if it's good and hot, the juices tend to move out and it doesn't absorb all the oil. So while that's frying, we are going to make our katsu sauce. So basically, and again, all of the amounts are going to be in the description below as usual. It's almost equal amounts of Worcestershire sauce and ketchup. Now this is our homemade ketchup. We'll do a video on this when tomatoes are back in season. And then about half as much of oyster sauce. And you want to make sure you get as much as you can out of those spoons. It's all great flavor. So we're going to add just a couple drops of liquid smoke here. Now you don't want to go overboard with this or it starts to taste like barbecue sauce, which you don't really want necessarily in this. But with those really simple ingredients, you get that nice zingy sort of zesty katsu sauce that you recognize from going to a Japanese restaurant. We were a little surprised by how simple it was, and it's absolutely delicious. So here we go. If you have turned it over once and you think that one side is still a little pale, it's okay. You can turn it over again just to get a little more color on the outside. It's good and thin. The meat will cook very, very quickly, and that nice coating on the outside will keep it nice and moist inside. If you're out of paper towels, you can use a paper plate like this just to give it a little bit of draining, because a little bit of oil will come out of there. If you haven't seasoned your meat, that's where we recommend you add a little bit of seasoning on the outside as soon as it comes out of the fryer. Just a quick little dash of salt, and you're good to go. And that's it. If you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.